My name is Dr. Adrian Clark, a forensic psychologist who specializes in criminal behavior and the psychological effects of trauma. The terrifying legend of the Zodiac Slayer is tied to an experience that permanently changed my understanding of reality. It allows me to tell the story that started my journey into the depths of human darkness, blurring the lines between history and personal horror. In 2019, I met a young patient named Olivia in my clinic, even though she was only 15 years old, but she was much older than her age. Olivia's story is special and tragic. It began with a sudden illness, a feeling of terror that consumed her life. She described an oppressive, terrifying presence, as if invisible eyes were watching her every move. Her bedroom curtains opened on their own one night as she lay paralyzed with fear, revealing dark shadows. She insists it's not a person, but there is something much worse. Her mental and physical health deteriorated due to constant anxiety, a vivid nightmare, and the restless nights that disturb her life. Although I have worked with patients who experienced hallucinations or sleep paralysis due to trauma, but Olivia's situation is unique. Her intense description, coupled with her declining health, it indicates a deeper or possibly supernatural phenomenon. She felt imprisoned, suffering not only from this closeness, but there was also a wave of evil energy that seemed to be stimulated by sadness. I intend to help you face these demons, both real and imaginary. I started exploring the Zodiac, who is one of the most famous criminals in history. At the same time as my professional interests, the case receives new attention when Casebreakers, a group of amateur detectives, claims to be able to identify the murderer that is former painting contractor Gary Francis Poste. Poste's story fascinates me. He moved to Graveland near Yosemite in 1974 after being accused of a murder spree. He teaches hunting, survival, and unruly criminal activity for a group of young men he mentored there. Some of his followers describe him as charming but controlling, which is often found in people with psychotic personalities. Casebreakers have pieced together surrounding evidence that casts doubt on rumors that he has or is accused of dementia, and conflicting evidence holds for the Zodiac signs in later years. Poste is the ideal Zodiac man. He is still young, used to serve in the military, and is fascinated by shocking mysteries. Tangible characteristics such as fingerprints and DNA could not clearly link him to the crime. There are many theories, from whispered accusations by former co-workers to an anagram that allegedly revealed his name in a secret Zodiac message. One chilling account involves an alleged confession, in which Poste claims to have learned the whereabouts of victim Donna Lass, who was hidden in a pine tree near Yosemite, despite these assertions. But this theory is largely rejected by law enforcement agencies, and many experts, including myself, are skeptical of this. Learning more about the Zodiac episode saw parallels between Poste's Zodiac profile and Olivia's ghost. Where I learned more about the Zodiac episode, Zodiac's calculated malice is reminiscent of the intelligence, predatory, and relentlessness she describes to her tormentors. I'm not saying Olivia's identity is Poste's ghost or a real person, but the psychological resonance is undeniable. The depression surrounding the Zodiac seemed to prey on her fears and weaknesses and take over her life. One day, Olivia shared a startling revelation. In her dreams, she often whispered secret messages, some of which are similar to the infamous Zodiac cards. It was a coincidence too remarkable to ignore. She explains that the person is constantly observing and losing focus. This is very similar to the Poste's description of his deception in Groveland. Has she made connections in her subconscious that are filled with cultural narratives about evil, or is there something more sinister at play? I address Olivia's trauma through the use of symbolic and psychological interventions. Together we explore her dreams, separate the various elements, and unleash their power. I also helped her regain her sense of security by teaching grounding techniques. Meanwhile, my research into Poste's life in the Zodiac became a passion. I wanted to know how the human mind creates such permanent terror, whether through the ghost of a young woman or through an act of violence. Olivia's condition gradually improved. After the nightmare stopped, she began to build a new life. But the scars remain, however, and the division's case remains unresolved. Whether Poste is guilty or innocent is a matter of debate, and his shadow still haunts crime investigators and true fans alike. What I take away from this collection of stories is that evil emerges from chaos and terror, whether it's a deadly form or a supernatural power. Olivia's perseverance taught me that the human spirit can triumph in the face of adversity, and that maybe, just maybe, the unsolved mysteries surrounding the Zodiac Killer may hold a lesson for anyone who studies the nature of fear and mental strength, not just criminologists. At one point, I believed I knew everyone in the neighborhood. I thought I understood the quiet old man across the street, a guy who looks a little like the weird neighbor. Secrets start to come out, and before we get dark, I used to be able to imagine that happening. I believe I know a man who lives in the house at the end of the street and has the perfect life. And now I have never seen anyone like that before. I live on the edge of town. Quiet place. People waved to each other, children played and laughed. And my family, my wife Jess, our daughter Ava, and I felt more relieved than angry. We came here to escape the hustle and bustle of the world and wanted peace and safety, but we were wrong. Something worse was waiting for Alan Richmond, who lived across the street from us. Meanwhile, the neighbors never warmed to him. I didn't think much of it, being a lonely person. He was one of those awkward old men who like to be left alone. Of course, his house is neat, but it was always strangely quiet. It was as if Alan had never possessed it. He kept to himself, avoid eye contact, and never invite conversation. This is a type that at first seems innocent, but that's what he fooled us all about. Then there was John Richmond, Alan's brother, whose name still makes me shiver, with a perfect life. That's what we believe, the man everyone in town envies, rich, respectable, charming. But the truth of John's life doesn't just slip into the past. It came back to haunt us all in the worst possible way. Emily Saunders, John's wife, disappeared in the early 1980s. He's gone. It's gone. Everyone thought she had left him. But nothing fits. Her family believed otherwise. There are rumors and whispers. John didn't say anything, but his silence only made people more suspicious. Then John's close friend Claire Dawson passed away. A gunshot wound to the back of the head was found at her home. Looks like the theft went wrong. Until you look closer, unused parts Claire knows something, and that cost her her life. Peter Black, John's neighbor, was last seen in 2001. John claimed that Peter attacked him and was forced to kill him in self-defense. But I knew something was wrong. The story is so neat, it's so fitting. John is walking free. But the townspeople, who still whisper about Emily, Claire, and Peter, no, the truth is never far away. It is buried beneath a picture-perfect facade. Waiting to creep out, however, it is John's troubled past that will haunt me. It will be Alan's. A knock at the door one afternoon broke the silence of a rare moment of solitude. Ava was visiting a friend while Jess was out running errands. I was trying to take a nap on the sofa when I heard the sound. Tapping softly at first, then getting harder and more insistent. I was too tired to worry at first, but then the door opened and Alan stood there, smiling widely. I feel the cold. It felt like something was terribly wrong. "Hi, Mark," he said in a very loud and happy voice. There was something in his wide, restless eyes that made my spine tingle. He stood there for a moment, waiting for the invitation I wanted to give him. "Is everything okay?" I asked in a curious tone. "Okay, great." "Yes," Alan said, walking past me into the living room. "Just wanted to say hello. Can I come in?" I took a step back. The discomfort began to increase. The man's strange act of following the rules was that his garage door across the street was still open. But Alan didn't seem to notice or care about anything. He sat on the sofa. His eyes swept around the room. He wasn't looking at me. He didn't look at anything familiar. Staring at the TV, he asked, "What movie is that?" Without looking at it, I rubbed my temples to dispel the fog of confusion. "I know, Mom. I was asleep." There was something more than Alan had been worried about. He is a person who keeps everything in line. A person who looks at others like a hawk. However, right now, his hands were shaking. His pupils dilated. "They're not all there. Your daughter, how are they?" I asked, noticing something that made my blood run cold. a faint red that hadn't been removed from my nails yet. His eyes darted to his hands, but he did not speak. A long silence stretched between us. Full of tension, Alan then laughed. But it's not his own. It was a tense, worried smile. "What about me?" he asked. He stammered, looking around as if there was no sound in the room. My voice froze when I told him you had 3 daughters. "Chloe, Kelsey, and Quinn, where are they?" His face changed. His eyes were blank. "There is no daughter I have." His voice was flat, too quiet, too empty. "I can't breathe. You're doing it. Where are they?" I said, trembling again. He froze. For a moment, his face moved silently. Then the words spread out incoherently. He whispered, "Those 3 girls were never mine." His voice was soft and trembling with something other than fear. My stomach turned. His behavior and the blood on his hands were not only wrong, he was crazy. Something had broken within him. I grabbed his wrist and tried to push him off the sofa. He resisted, but his eyes, those eyes, were empty. His thoughts were far away. He stuck in a nightmare he created. I pushed open the door in a desperate attempt to free him as the van pulled into the alley. Alan's wife is Jenny. She closed the garage door, and I peered through the window, not knowing what was going on in her house. Then she stopped as she reached the front door. What she saw was unknown to me, but I knew it was enough to make her scream. A high-pitched, oppressive scream that echoed down the quiet street, and that sound still haunts me. Alan turned to me. His voice was annoyingly quiet, as if nothing had happened. "I told you, they are not my children," hanging between us like a curse. "His words are yours." I can't process it. My mind was racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. But it doesn't make sense. Alan doesn't just hide the truth about his daughter. He also hides an even darker secret. Secrets of the past that he could not reveal, which is full of blood and terror. The truth has come out, and it was coming towards him. But it's not just for him, for all of us. I believe John's past Richmond will always follow me, but it won't be Alan himself. His nightmare, his secret, and his lies. That would consume me. It wasn't just his daughter's blood that stained his soul. Something worse is coming. One thing that will drag us all down into the shadows. And the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night staring at the dark? I never saw that coming.